Xavier Becerra, Chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, joined by our Vice Chairman, Joe Crowley from New York. Also with us are the three Democratic House Conferees on the Budget Conference, our Ranking Member on Budget, Chris Van Hollen, our Assistant Democratic Leader, Jim Clyburn, and our Ranking Member of the Appropriations Committee, Nita Lowey. We're going to be a little brief today because we have a pending meeting that some of us have to run to. I just wanted to mention a couple of points. Two important numbers: 800,000 and 13. Important because 800,000 is the number of jobs that will be lost in America. 800,000 Americans who will be out of work in the next year if we don't do something in this budget conference negotiation to dispose of the mindless across-the-board cuts to important programs, everything from education to defense, under what's called a sequester. We know that's a fact. We know those jobs are going to go if Congress just twiddles its thumbs instead of trying to help Americans get back to work. 13, it's usually an unlucky number, but in this case it has to be a good number, hopefully a lucky number, and that's December 13th. That's the day the budget conferees are supposed to report back a budget so that this Congress won't face the debacle of a few weeks ago where Republicans decided to shut down our government and take a whole bunch of Americans out of work again. This is a chance for us to show the American people we get it. We understand that you can't have politicians who are out of touch and in denial. You need to get your work done. And that's where I believe that you see our Democratic conferees who are ready to get to work to get this done. We have put out proposals in the past, not only that include job creation, that include investments in very important things like early childhood education, in our infrastructure and building our roads and bridges and highways, but it also does what we need to keep our nation strong and secure by having the strongest defense in the world. We believe that we can get this done now. We should not be rooting for failure the way some politicians here in Washington, D.C. seem to do too often. And we can't afford to have a do-nothing agenda that we've seen for the last 3 years, not just last year, the last 3 years here in the House of Representatives. It's time for us to do what most Americans do every morning, get to work. And it's time for us to help a lot of those Americans who'd like to get up in the morning to go to a job, to get to work. And so we're thrilled that our conferees have been pushing very hard to put a pro-growth budget before the Congress, and we hope that they have success working with our colleagues in a bipartisan fashion on the Republican side. With that, let me yield now to our Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Becerra. Budget, isn't just about numbers. It's about real people's lives. It's about the priorities of the Congress for the American people. What we need is a budget with vision, something that my Republican colleagues have lacked. In fact, the unveiling of the Republican agenda for 2014 is just codification of the fact that it's not just blank, it's without a vision. I've been saying that repeatedly over the past few months, and now they have codified it themselves by distributing a blank agenda to their colleagues. Democrats, we have a vision. We want more Americans to have affordable health care. We have a plan to balance our budget and keep on investing in America. We have a plan to close tax loopholes and shut down rewards for those shipping American jobs overseas. We have a plan that is focused on creating jobs, growing the economy, and strengthening our middle class, all while responsibly reducing our deficit. And I think Americans would take that over a blank agenda any day. And with that, we'll turn it over to the Budget Conference Committee Ranking Member Chris Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley, and I want to thank Chairman and Vice Chairman of our caucus for working with all the members on the priorities of our caucus and the priorities of the country. It's great to be here with my fellow conferees on the Budget Committee. Look, the Republicans have a one-note agenda. It's to repeal the Affordable Care Act. They've done it, attempted to do it over 47 times now, and that's all they want to focus on right now. We all know the Affordable Care Act has helped millions of Americans. We also know it has some problems, and we stand ready to fix those problems. But Republicans want to play politics with the Affordable Care Act at the expense of the priorities of the country, primarily jobs and the economy, as the chairman said. And that's why the Democrats on the Budget Committee are putting forth a pro-jobs, pro-growth set of priorities. And our priorities are threefold. Number one, let's invest more right now in rebuilding and modernizing America's infrastructure. We've got to compete in the 21st century. We know we have huge unmet needs when it comes to our basic infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, as well as the infrastructure of the 21st century. We have high unemployment in the construction industry, so it's a no-brainer to move forward on that front. We also think we have to focus on making sure our kids get an education from their earliest days. And so we have an early education initiative as part of our short-term and long-term jobs plan. Two, we want to replace the sequester. It's eating away at very important investments in education, in science and research, and in infrastructure. And as the chairman of the caucus said, the Congressional Budget Office tells us if we don't replace the sequester, we will have 800,000 fewer jobs in this country this time next year. That's a self-inflicted wound we cannot afford, and we should fix that. And finally, at the end of this year, millions of Americans who are out of work and still looking for a job will lose the support that they have through unemployment compensations for their families. That would impact millions of Americans, and it would be very bad for local economies around the country if those Americans can no longer buy goods and services, pay the rent, and put food on the table for their families. And the Congressional Budget Office tells us one of the most important things we can do to help continue moving the economy forward is to make sure we don't leave those families without support. And again, families who are out there looking for jobs. So we want to focus on those things. Just in closing, as the Chairman Becerra said, the Republicans are now chairing this conference committee. It's their turn. They're in charge. And although we've put our priorities forward, we have not seen any plan, not any plan, from our Republican colleagues. It appears they just want to play politics with the Affordable Care Act, run out the clock on the budget negotiations, and that would be a great disappointment, I know, to the country. So with that, I want to turn it over to Mr. Clyburn, our assistant leader, who's done great service on this budget negotiation and many others.
Thank you very much. I think that all of you have seen the letter that Chairman Rogers has circulated. The letter has been signed by all of the subcommittee chairs, calling upon the budget conferees to get to numbers before the holidays arrive. We all have been focusing on December 13th as being the date that we are supposed to submit our product. The fact of the matter is January 15th is the day that will put us at the front door of another budget shutdown. If we do not come up with a budget, we all know that the continuing resolution comes to an end on January 15th. Now, I believe the same as Chairman Rogers, that we ought to get this done, and we should not wait on the 13th of December. We should do it before we go home for the holidays. I believe we ought to put the American people at ease as they gather to celebrate their families and each other during our holidays, and so that they will know that come January 15th, they will not be faced with another government shutdown while they are trying to pay off some of the expenses of those holidays. And so we, as you've heard from our ranking member, we have laid out our three-part proposal to address the issues that confront us in the immediacy, as well as some long term. And I think the time has come for the Republican chair of the conference to lay his proposal on the table. Let us act on it in time for the American people to see the results of our work and enjoy themselves and their families during the holidays. And with that, I'll yield to our ranking member on the Appropriations Committee, Ms. Lowey.
I think it's worth repeating that Chairman Rogers and the 12 Cardinals sent the letter to Speaker Boehner, sent the letter to our committee to make absolutely clear that they must have a number by November 22nd in order to do the work of the Appropriations Committee. As the ranking member on the House, I've talked on a regular basis with Chairwoman Mikulski in the Senate, and we all understand that we can't have a repeat of the shutdown that was caused by the Republicans. Some of us may remember that the Labor, Health, Human Services bill that funds so many of the priorities that our chairman referenced, education, the National Institutes of Health, and I can go on and on. If that bill is not funded, these priorities will suffer. That bill couldn't even come to the committee because there was nothing left. They were getting a 22% cut, the way the sequester impacted the appropriations process. Some of us may remember what happened to the Transportation HUD bill. That came to the floor, and the Republicans couldn't even get sufficient votes to pass the Transportation HUD bill, which also references so many of our priorities. Investing in transportations, our highways, our bridges, our roads, creates jobs, adds to a strong economy. Without it, we can't move forward as a country. So given the letter from our chair, Chairman Rogers, and the 12 Cardinals to Paul Ryan, the chair of the Budget Committee, saying we must have a number by November 22nd, all 12 Cardinals and Chairman Rogers and Barbara Mikulski in her letter, the chair in the Senate Committee, get it. In order for us to write these appropriations bills, sequester numbers just don't work. Now, as our chairman said, I don't know if Chairman Paul Ryan and Speaker Boehner are listening to their cardinals. Do they hear what they're saying, or are they just trying to run out the clock? If they run out the clock and the sequester is in place, we will not be able to do our work. I've been talking to my colleagues throughout the country. And even if you look at the defense part of the bill, that would get a $20 billion cut if, in fact, the committee does not report out a change getting rid of the sequester with a good budget number. Even that $20 billion would have a severe impact on all parts of the country and our economy. Because remember, you have the large contractors, and then you have the subcontractors. I've been talking to my colleagues in every part of the country, and they tell us stories about people out of work. So in conclusion, the sequester is unacceptable. We've got to have a real budget. The chairman of the Budget Committee and the 12 Cardinals gets it. The chairwoman of the Senate Appropriations Committee gets it. Patty Murray in the Senate, head of the Budget Committee, gets it. Paul Ryan, are you listening? We must have a number by November 22nd for us to go out for a week's vacation, whether we're working in the district or vacationing or eating turkey, whatever we choose to do. We've got to be responsible and to get this done before we leave. Thank you.
So we're left with this choice. We can either, as we all agree, both Republicans and Democrats, to be fiscally responsible, come up with a budget that will help us continue to reduce these deficits. We could do it smart, in a smart way, or we can let these mindless autopilot sequester cuts take their toll on all those men and women who work for our defense industry, all those families, what is it, some 55,000 families, I believe, who have had to keep their child out of a Head Start program because of the cuts to Head Start. We can do it in a smart way, or we can do it through an autopilot in a mindless way. And we're saying, let's do it in a smart bipartisan way and not wait till the end, the way we saw the government shutdown occur. And so with that, we'll take a question or two.
Chairman Becerra,
Chad.
big issue with the healthcare overnight, where McKinsey and Company said that there were red flags back in March and April, and that the HHS secretary testified to the contrary just a couple of weeks later. Internally, I mean, I know that you had a number of healthcare officials come up and talk with you last week. You said the mood had improved when you met with them Thursday. When they keep getting a drip like that, does the mood go back down because your folks have to come out and defend this stuff and have questions themselves? Were they not were they not getting the truth or accurate information from the HHS?
I think we've had a number of witnesses from the administration testify about the implementation of the Affordable Care Act and its rollout. I think most of those witnesses have testified how they worked very hard to make sure that we could get this done right. Part of the problem, of course, was the high volume of people who decided to log on to the website to take a look at what they could now secure in terms of affordable health care. Some of it we now know is a result of not having prepared the website for that type of volume in the right way. And so they're in the process of doing everything they can to get that website working the right way. We want to remind people that you don't have to go on the website, or it's not the only way that you can secure good, affordable health care insurance, and you can do that by phone, you can do it in person. And so we're trying to encourage folks to use every means possible, because most Americans will tell you they want to fix the website because they want to get that health insurance and join the ranks of those of us who have had quality, affordable health insurance for quite some time.
This must be driving your members up a wall, because you are obviously the Republican end, but your side has defended this foursquare but has reservations and questions about how things went, and then you get another bit of news like this, and it just seems like this keeps coming day after day.
So long as we have a health security law that gives people the peace of mind of knowing that they will never have to face bankruptcy just because they took their child to a doctor or a hospital, that's important. That's what we want to achieve. And so we're going to continue to push the administration to do everything possible to fix the website, fix those aspects of the health security law so that everyone can finally say they've got health security in their lives. And so that's the bottom line for all of us in the Democratic caucus. We continue to work towards that. But we don't want to lose sight of the fact that right now Americans are looking for work, and Americans want to build again in this country, and that's what we want to focus on, because the reality is that we have watched this Congress do virtually nothing. It's a do-nothing agenda, and it's time for us to get to work to do the things that Americans expect us to do, and that is to help the private sector create those jobs that we need. Any other questions?
Let me just add to that real quickly. Our caucus wants to see this law work. We're working day and night to ensure that that happens. Our Republican colleagues are doing the exact opposite. They're trying to undermine it in any way, shape, or form. They're not concerned about the website. They could care less about the website. They could care less as to whether or not Americans are getting, for the first time in their lives, affordable insurance. What they're more focused on is undoing and undermining the Affordable Care Act. Let's be clear about that. What our colleagues are concerned about right now is the looming fiscal cliffs that once again are in front of us. We thought they were behind. We thought there was a conference committee put in place to address those issues, and yet what we're hearing this morning is that very little progress is being made on that front. And so once again, Americans in the new year will be facing, once again, 2 more fiscal cliffs in mid-January and early February. And that's what our caucus is focused on right now. We want to see an end to these types of games and focusing on the real issues of the American people, getting back to the agenda of actually accomplishing something for our country. And what the majority leader demonstrated yesterday was, once again, that their agenda for 2014 is a blank slate. They have no agenda. They have no ideas, no thoughts about how to move the country forward. We as Democrats do. And we know when the American people have the opportunity to put us back in place in power in the House of Representatives, they'll do just that because of their lack of agenda.
May I have a question for one of the
Go ahead, let me,
please?
right away.
Yeah, are Democrats discussing an alternative in case the conference committee isn't able to come to a deal?
Let me ask the conferees to address that first.
Well, we've had before the House of Representatives a very specific plan to replace the sequester to prevent the loss of the 800,000 jobs, and it would achieve the same amount of deficit reduction. We do it through targeted cuts over a period of time. We eliminate a lot of these excessive and unnecessary agriculture subsidies, and we close a lot of special interest tax breaks. Like the tax breaks for big oil companies, there are other tax breaks that you can look to, closing special breaks that, as Mr. Clyburn indicated, actually provide incentives for American companies to move overseas. So there's a clear way forward, a balanced approach to replacing the sequester, avoiding the job loss, investing in education. But our Republican colleagues have refused to come forward with any alternative. We have laid out our priorities. And I do want to emphasize the fact that there are obviously important questions about the health exchanges and about issues that come up with the Affordable Care Act. But let's be clear. Republicans want to focus exclusively on that at the expense of jobs and the economy, because they've got no agenda there. And as my other colleagues reminded us, what is the Republican position on the Affordable Care Act? It's not to fix it. They shut down the government to try to shut down the entire Affordable Care Act, right? I mean, if they'd had their way, the exchanges would have gone away, along with all the protections for seniors on Medicare, the protections that allow you to keep your children on your health plan until you're age 26. They want to get rid of all of that. And now they only want to talk about the exchange because they don't want to talk about jobs and the economy. Let's not let them run out of the clock. Let's not have another government shutdown. Let's not threaten to default on our debt. Let's get to work.
Take the last question.
Howard, I have a question for the three conferees. How are the three of you interpreting that letter that we got yesterday from Mr. Rogers and the 12 cardinals? Is this indicative of some sort of rift between the Republican appropriators and perhaps Mr. Ryan?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a rift. I think it's the acceptance of reality. This is where we are. I think Ms. Lowey said it correctly. Before we leave here next week, whenever we leave here to go out for the Thanksgiving holidays, we ought to be able to help put the American people's minds at ease. And you cannot do that if there's a cliff waiting them just after the holidays are over. January 15th is, in fact, a drop-dead date for the continuing resolution. And how do you get beyond that? That's by presenting to the appropriators some numbers that we have agreed on that will get us to where we need to be. I don't think there's any rift. I think Harold Rogers is an outstanding person. He's a guy that I know very well and like very much. And he's, once again, being real. And all of us ought to get real.
Just to add one more thing to what my colleague said, that letter came from the 12 cardinals and the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. Another letter came from Chairwoman Mikulski. We understand that if you're going to avoid sequester, if you're going to avoid a continuing resolution and continue to have an impact on jobs and the economy in the district, we have to get to work now. So the question is not what the Appropriations Committee is doing, because they understand, we understand what we have to do our work. But the question is, again, is Paul Ryan and Speaker Boehner listening? Do they hear what the appropriators are saying to do our work, or are they just going to run out the clock? And that is the question.
Yeah, if I could just, that letter is a recognition from leading Republicans, including the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, that the House Republican budget is unworkable, because the House Republican budget keeps in place the sequester, which eats away at these important investments and will result in the loss of 800,000 jobs. And so you have the Republican chairman of the Appropriations Committee saying that the House Republican budget is bad for the country and unworkable. And so it's now time for the Republican budget negotiators to wake up to the fact, listen to their own members, and move forward. Because right now they appear to be trying to run out the clock to keep those very deep, immediate, and arbitrary cuts in place that will result in job loss in this country.
So you can see how we saw how during the budget showdown, the government was the victim. We shut down government. Some 800,000 Americans couldn't go to work because the Republicans decided to shut it down. We saw the civil war that was right before our eyes unfolding within the Republican conference. And as the assistant leader, Mr. Clyburn, said, you have some folks who are saying, we got to stop being so out of touch as Republicans and in denial about what we have to do, and we have to move forward. Otherwise, the sequester is going to come back and bite a whole bunch of Americans when it comes to jobs. And so for the chairman of the Appropriations Committee and the 12 subcommittee chairmen of the Appropriations Committee to come forward, all Republicans, and tell the Republican leadership, wake up. That's a clear wake-up call to the House Republican leadership to get to work. And our conferees are ready to work. The Democratic Caucus members are ready to go to work. We can get this done in a bipartisan fashion, so we're ready to get to work. With that, thank you.